They said silence was safer. That if you kept your head down, did your work, and never asked for more, the world would at least leave you alone. But silence never protected her. It only made the whispers louder, the stares sharper, and the weight of being different heavier than anyone could see. She was only 17, yet her back was already bent under burdens no teenager should carry. Every morning, before school, she swept the marble floors of a mansion that didn't belong to her. She polished silver cutlery she'd never be invited to eat with. She dusted books in a library that no one expected her to read. And above all, she fed a dog that belonged to a man who had more money than entire neighborhoods combined. That morning felt ordinary at first. The same golden gates, the same cold walls, the same hush of voices from people who spoke to her as if her name were too heavy to pronounce. But what happened next would silence a room full of power and wealth. It would make even the billionaire himself freeze in a way that no business deal, no lawsuit, no headline ever had. It began when she bent down, her small hands steady, and set the dog's bowl on the polished stone floor. To anyone else, it was a simple act of care. To the house staff, it was routine. But at that very moment, the sound of soft footsteps echoed across the hall. The billionaire's daughter, delicate, privileged, accustomed to being obeyed rather than questioned, paused in the doorway. She watched in silence, her wide eyes following every movement of the girl who was supposed to remain invisible. And then, with no warning, she walked forward, knelt beside the black girl, and placed another handful of food into the dog's dish. The room froze. The billionaire, standing just steps away, froze. Because, in that instant, his daughter wasn't following his rules, or her mother's etiquette, or the rehearsed manners of wealth. She was following her. Viewers, imagine that. Picture the daughter of unimaginable privilege, bending down in imitation of a girl whose presence was usually dismissed. Can you see it? Can you feel the shock in that silence? The air heavy with a truth no one dared name? That's the moment the story begins to unravel. And if you think this is just about a dog being fed, you're mistaken. This is about dignity, justice, and the way humanity can surface in the most unexpected places. Now pause here. If you're watching this, ask yourself, what would you have done in that room? Would you have smiled? Would you have sneered? Or would you have felt that sharp sting of realization that the lines society drew so boldly weren't as solid as they seemed? Before we move forward, I want you to hold that image in your mind. And if it grips you the way it gripped everyone in that mansion, don't forget to share this story, leave your thoughts below, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you shaken in ways you didn't expect. Her name was Amara. She carried it like a secret treasure, because few in that house ever bothered to say it. To them, she was girl, or helper, or worse, the maid. But to herself, when she whispered her name under her breath as she walked to the bus stop each morning, she was Amara, the daughter of a mother who had taught her that dignity was not given, it was held. That no matter how the world looked at you, you were never less than anyone. But dignity is heavy when you're young, and every day the house tried to chip it away. Sometimes through outright words, like the whispered jokes among the staff who thought she didn't hear. Sometimes through silence, like the way guests looked right through her as if she were part of the furniture. And sometimes through small humiliations, like being ordered to feed the billionaire's dog before she herself could eat breakfast. That dog, though, Bentley, had never judged her. Strange, isn't it, that an animal can sometimes see clearer than people? Bentley wagged his tail the same no matter who held his bowl. He licked her hand gently as if to say, "I see you." It wasn't much, but on some mornings, it was the only kindness she received. That morning, Bentley's tail thumped against the floor as Amara poured his food. And that was when the billionaire's daughter, Eliza, appeared. She was only 12, draped in silk, with a softness in her eyes that hadn't yet hardened into her father's coldness. She watched Amara in silence, as though noticing her for the very first time. Eliza knelt down. Her dress brushed the polished floor. She reached into the bag of food, took out a handful, and added it to Bentley's dish. Her Her small hand rested beside Amara's for just a second. And then it happened. The billionaire entered. He had come to check on a phone call. Nothing more. But his eyes fell on that scene, and his stride faltered. His daughter, the heir to his empire, on her knees beside a girl whose existence was supposed to stay in the shadows. The room filled with a silence so sharp it could cut glass. To the staff, it was scandalous. To the father, it was almost betrayal. And to Amara, it was something she didn't yet understand, but felt deep in her chest. A shift, a ripple in waters that had always seemed still and cold. Eliza looked up at her father. "She's kind to Bentley," she said simply. "So I wanted to be kind too." Those words struck him harder than any boardroom accusation ever had, because kindness, real kindness, was a currency he rarely dealt in, and to see it bloom not from his wealth, not from his teachings, but from the actions of a girl he considered the help, unsettled him in a way that numbers never could. Now think about this for a second. Think about the irony. A billionaire who thought he owned everything, property, people's time, even their silence, suddenly realizing he didn't own the purest influence in his own daughter's heart. That belonged to Amara. If you're watching this, do you feel that shiver? That moment where the world turns upside down, even if only for a second? Drop a comment if you do, because that feeling, that's the story. But this was only the beginning. Later that day, whispers raced through the mansion. Some of the staff shook their heads in disbelief. Others muttered warnings. "She'll get in trouble. She should have just done her job quietly." And Amara herself wondered if she had crossed some invisible line, though all she had done was what she always did, feed Bentley. Yet she could feel eyes on her. Not just the staff, not just the housekeeper who muttered that she should remember her place, but Eliza herself. The little girl followed her down hallways, asked questions, smiled in ways she never had before. "Do you like books?" Eliza asked once, catching her in the library. Amara froze. No one ever asked her questions. They asked things of her. Clean this, fetch that, hurry up, but no one ever asked about her. "Yes," she said quietly. "I love them." "Then why? Don't you read these?" Eliza's voice was genuinely puzzled. Amara glanced at the tall shelves, leather-bound volumes that smelled of dust and wealth, books she had dusted 1,000 times but never dared touch. "They're not for me," she whispered. "Why not?" The question was so innocent, but it sliced deep. Why not? Because society said so. Because her skin said so? Because the same house that let her hold their dog's leash wouldn't let her hold their words? She didn't answer, but Eliza's silence spoke volumes. She was beginning to see what her father refused to. See, that dignity wasn't about money. It was about humanity. And humanity, once seen, cannot be unseen. By evening, word of the small act of Eliza kneeling beside Amara had already reached dinner conversation. The billionaire's wife, with a smile tight as glass, commented, "Our daughter has curious ideas lately." She glanced at Amara in a way that said, "You'll pay for this." But Eliza spoke up. "She's kind, and I want to be like her." The table went silent. Forks hovered. And in that silence, the billionaire himself, normally a man of quick comebacks, couldn't find words. Because in truth, he had seen it too. That night, Amara lay in her small room, heart racing. She hadn't planned any of this. She had only fed a dog. But somehow, in that simple act, she had cracked open a wall that wealth and prejudice had built sky high. Viewers, let me ask you, have you ever had a moment where someone saw you, truly saw you, when you thought you were invisible? That moment when your dignity shines through despite the world trying to hide it? If you have, you know why Amara couldn't sleep that night. And if you haven't, this story is about to show you why it matters more than you think. Because what began with feeding a dog was about to grow into something neither Amara nor the billionaire could ever forget. The night after Eliza's quiet defiance, the mansion felt different. Heavy, as though the marble walls themselves carried the weight of an unspoken shift. Amara lay awake in her small attic room, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying the day in her mind. She had done nothing unusual. She had simply fed Bentley. Yet somehow, that act had unsettled an entire house of power. She whispered her name to herself again, the way she always did before sleep, Amara, a reminder that she was not girl or help or maid. She was her mother's daughter, and her mother had always said, when the world tries to erase you, you write your name deeper. But Amara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Would they scold her? Punish her? Dismiss her from work entirely? Fear sat heavy in her chest. Yet underneath that fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Because for the first time in that house, someone had seen her. The next morning, the billionaire summoned her. She walked into his office, her steps slow, her palms damp. The office was like another world. Dark wood, towering windows, bookshelves that seemed to watch you. He sat behind a massive desk, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Eliza was there too, sitting on a chair near the window, legs swinging, eyes bright but nervous. Amara, the billionaire said, his voice calm but sharp, the kind of calm that always hid something dangerous. My daughter seems to have taken an interest in you. Amara lowered her gaze. Yes, sir. He leaned forward. That is not your role here. Do you understand? You are here to work, nothing more. The words landed like blows. She had heard them before, from others, in different forms, but hearing them now, in front of Eliza, felt different. Because Eliza's eyes widened, and for the first time she seemed to realize what her father truly thought of Amara. But she's nice. To Bentley, Eliza blurted out, and she likes books like I do. Why can't I talk to her? The billionaire's jaw tightened. His empire was built on control, of money, of markets, of people. And here was his daughter questioning him not with rebellion, but with innocence. That innocence was harder to silence than any protest. Amara stood frozen, torn between fear and something stronger. She remembered her mother's words. Dignity is not what they give you. It's what you refuse to let them take. Sir, she said quietly, her voice steady despite her pounding heart, I have only done my work, nothing more. He stared at her, unblinking. Then, with a wave of his hand, he dismissed her. But his silence lingered. Over the next days, Eliza followed Amara everywhere. Not like a shadow, but like sunlight. Curious, warm, insistent. She asked about her favorite colors, her dreams, her family. Amara answered carefully at first, afraid of saying too much. But the girl's sincerity was disarming. One afternoon, in the garden, Eliza asked, Why don't you sit at the table when we eat? Amara almost laughed from the absurdity of the question. Because I'm not allowed, she said gently. Who said? Amara looked at her, searching for the right words. It's just the way things are. Eliza frowned. Then, it's a stupid way. Her voice was so certain, so unfiltered, that Amara felt something shift again. A 12-year-old had seen through walls that generations of adults had built, but not everyone welcomed this change. The staff whispered. Some sneered, and one evening, the billionaire's wife confronted Amara directly. You are overstepping, she hissed in the kitchen, her diamond earrings catching the light. Do not confuse kindness with equality. Know your place. The words cut deep. Yet before Amara could reply, Eliza walked in. She had overheard. Her small voice rang out, sharper than her mother's jewels. Her place is with dignity, Eliza said. The kitchen went silent. The wife's face burned with fury, but she said nothing more. News of these moments spread. Guests began to notice. Eliza's behavior, sitting beside Amara in the garden, asking her about books, refusing to let her be invisible. The billionaire tried to contain it, but the more he resisted, the stronger Eliza's quiet defiance became. One evening, during a dinner party, the tension finally erupted. A guest, wealthy, polished, smug, made a remark about the help within Amara's earshot. Laughter rippled around the table. Amara lowered her gaze, swallowing the sting, but Eliza stood up. Don't laugh at her, she said, her voice trembling but loud. She's kinder than all of you. The room fell silent. Glasses froze midair. The billionaire's face hardened, caught between anger and something deeper, shame. Because the truth, once spoken aloud, cannot be stuffed back into silence. Mara's hands shook as she carried a tray away, but inside her, something fierce ignited. She had not spoken, yet her dignity had spoken through Eliza. Viewers, pause for a second. Imagine being in that room. Imagine hearing a child defend someone society tried to erase. Would you laugh? Would you change the subject? Or would you feel that quiet fire spreading in your chest? The kind that tells you justice just walked into the room? If you feel that, don't let it go. Comment your thoughts, because these are the moments that decide what kind of people we are. The turning point came days later. The billionaire had invited business partners to his home, a showcase of wealth. As always, Eliza slipped away from the glittering party, found Amara in the kitchen, and tugged her hand. "Come with me," she whispered. Before Amara could protest, Eliza led her into the dining hall. Guests turned, conversations hushed, and there they were. Eliza, in her satin dress, holding the hand of the black girl who fed the dog. "Everyone," Eliza said, her voice small but steady, "this is my friend, Amara." The room froze. Forks clinked softly onto plates. The billionaire rose from his seat, his face unreadable. For a moment, Amara wished she could disappear, but Eliza held her hand tighter. And then Bentley, sweet, loyal Bentley, trotted into the hall, wagging his tail. He sat beside Amara, as though declaring to the world whose side he was on. Something in the room shifted. Some guests frowned, others whispered, but a few, just a few, smiled. The billionaire's gaze swept the room, then landed on Amara. For the first time, he didn't see the help. He saw the person his daughter chose to honor. And in that silence, heavy and electric, he did something no one expected. He nodded. Just once. A small gesture, but from a man like him, it was thunder. That night, Amara returned to her attic room, with her heart pounding. She had not asked for this. She had only fed a dog. But somehow, that simple act had torn open cracks in walls she thought were unbreakable. She knew challenges lay ahead. She knew prejudice doesn't disappear overnight. But she also knew this. She was no longer invisible. Eliza had seen her. Bentley had trusted her. And even the billionaire had been forced to pause, to reconsider, to freeze in the face of dignity that refused to be silenced. Viewers, let this sink in. Sometimes change doesn't start with grand speeches or violent revolutions. Sometimes it begins with something as small as feeding a dog, with a quiet act of care that exposes the fault lines in a world built on injustice. If this story moved you, if it stirred something in your chest, then don't let it end here. Share it, speak it, carry it forward, because somewhere, someone else is waiting to be seen, and maybe you, yes, you watching right now, will be the one to see them. So tell me, if you had been in that mansion, whose side would you have stood on? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe, because voices like Amara's deserve to echo far beyond one house, one city, one moment. Because in the end, dignity isn't a gift the world gives us. It's the fire we keep alive no matter how hard the world tries to snuff it out. And Amara's fire had just begun to burn.